request management is again going to be an important thing when you take any IT environment. So as you know that typically the IT team receives a wide range and wide variety of requests. Either that can be an incident as simple as reporting something is not working, or it could be an service request, requesting for some sort of service or access. It could be anything, right? So in our application, we are going to typically see how these things are configured and how we can categorize the request, and how it's going to make it easier for the technicians to work on, as well as for the requesters to find information, as well as raise requests to the appropriate team instead of uh, filing them in an inappropriate or incorrect department or team. So that's what we are going to check today. Before we begin about the configurations and the things that our application has to offer, so let's just take a look at how the requesters will be seeing the portal. So if your users or if your customers are more accommodated to self-service portals where they can find information about an issue or report some sort of incidents, uh, so this is the screen that they will be seeing on a regular basis, like for reporting or finding any information or solutions for the issue that they are facing, or in some cases they might be requesting for some sort of service. So this is the default portal that will be available for for the users, and from here they get to choose either they can report an issue, or they can request for a service, or they can also view the solution that is already published. So if they are going through some sort of issue, they can first check the solutions, and if the solution is not available over there, then they can report that incident, and your technicians can solve their problem. So this is the typical view that your users will be seeing. So no matter what the portal that they are going, in most of the scenarios, this is the view that they will be getting. So typically they will see their summary on requests that they have filed and any updates over here or not. If there are any announcements, they will be seeing those announcements over here. And this is again a widget where the popular solutions are shown to the users, and a simple document on how to use the portal and how to create the request. So that's the information that's available over here. So with the new latest version, so we brought up an feature where you can enable, or you can add the if you go inside this report an issue, this is going to populate the list of services and the instance that you can report on specific categories. So we brought up an feature where your users can choose those categories right from here. I mean, this is just to minimize the click of a button, like they don't need to go, or they don't need to click on the report an issue to choose a specific category. Instead, they can choose it right from here. So if there are any sort of service that you want to populate on the home page itself, you can enable those options, and that's going to help them. So this is the typical view, and let's see what are the options that your users will be seeing when they click on to report an issue. So when they click on to report an issue, they will see the list of service categories. You can see, so these are the list of service categories that I have configured in this specific instance. They can see all these categories, and they can go into a respective category, and they can report an incident if it's something to do with an issue that they are facing. If they want some sort of service, then again they can go to request a service, and they can file, or they can go to the appropriate category, and they can request for the specific service. Like I want an iPhone, so I can go to request for an iPhone, and I can file that over here. So that's what it is about, the basic request review. Now let's take a look at the configurations our application has to offer. So in the beginning, as I mentioned, IT team is going to receive a wide range of requests, and in most of the cases, those requests are going to be recurring. And so uh, at the end of the day, the workflow that you're going to follow for those requests is going to be pretty much similar, right? So you will be following a workflow. Let's say if it's in service request, it may go through some sort of approval to the respective teams. And after the approval is completed, you may be offering the service. If it's rejected, you may be rejecting the service. So similar to that, it's the technician's job or the one or the administrator's job to configure those things in efficient way for the technician as well as for the users to utilize the all the functionalities that the tool has to offer and to minimize their work. So let's get started with incident management. So when it comes to request management, most of the scenarios we are going to go with an incident management, or it could be an service request. So let's take a look at incident request and what are the things that is available, and then we can go with the service catalog as well. So when it comes to incident management, as you can see, so we have a dedicated pane over here for incident management where you can create different templates over here. So depending upon the criteria or depending upon the workflow or the the information that you need to collect, you can configure the templates under incident templates section. And other things included like business rules, feed and form rules. So these are some ways to manipulate the request before the request creation or after the request creation. So we'll be seeing in detail about each and every single field or each and every available option inside these incident management and service management. But so in general, so this is where you configure any incident templates. Okay, so keep that in mind that whenever you want to create incident templates, because in some scenarios you may be creating ticket templates under service catalog and maybe wondering like why this is not getting populated on the report and issue section, why is not coming over here, because incident management is incident templates are created in a different place, and service are created in a different place. So service management or service request are configured under service catalog. So this is a section where you pretty much uh, configure all of those things, ranging from the service categories. So service categories. So these are the categories available for your end users, right? So even if I click on incident or if I click on service, so I can see these are the list of services available for me, like application login, communication, data management, email, so on and so forth. So where we can configure this, that is configured under the service category. So you will be configuring, let's say for an instance, if I want to create a service category, so I'm creating a service category, I can name it as, um, contracts, something like that, some name I can choose, the department if there is any available. And if I want to set an icon, so here you can see that there are a lot of icons that we can go with. This is gonna give you that appealing for the users. They will be able to identify easily whenever they are filing the ticket. So these icons are uploaded from here. You can either choose from the available set. So as you can see that we do offer yeah, out of the box, like some default icons for you to use. You can either choose from the icon set, or if you want to upload your own icon, you can also do that. When it comes to uploading, you have just to make sure that you're uploading it in the right size. So I'm going to choose from the available set. Let me choose an icon, like go through this. So let me choose that icon and let me save that. And the moment I added the contract, now what I can do is what I can do is I will be able to add services under this contract. So it will not be available right away. I have created it under service and it will not be available right away. You can see that it's not populated. But the moment that I create a new service under this, I can say like new contract required, something like that. So I can say like this, and if I want to give any subject predefined, I can go with that, or I can also leave it as it is, requesting for new act for an asset, something like that. Okay, so I'm creating this over here, and I'm saving this. So I have saved this template. Now, if I enable this option for the requester, if I enable this, this will be available for the users along with the category. So if I refresh this page, now I can see the new module being populated over here. You can see the contract is populated. So this is, if you want to customize this, if you want to move, or if you want to rearrange any of these service categories, you will need to go to admin and then service catalog, and using this customized layout, you'll be able to move around the things. Like if you want to drag and drop things in a different place, that you can do, you can use the reorder option. Or if you want to go with entirely different look, like list view, or two-page view, you can go with any sort of view that your end customer prefers. So it's up to you on doing that and expanding the details. So this is where you configure the service categories. You can create as many categories that you want, and you can configure the respective services under that category. So any service that you create will have, an associated incident template as well, right? So if you're offering database services or data services to your end customer, so there are chances that it needs to be monitored, and there are chances the users might be facing issues as well. So which is why in incident templates, you can map those services directly. So if I go into, I don't want to create a new template, I'm just editing it. And from here itself, I can choose that contracts service. So I'm assuming that this incident template is associated with contract. So whenever your users are facing some sort of issue with contract module, for instance, contract module. So let's assume application login, they are facing some sort of issue with application login. It's as a service that you're offering. So this is where you configure or appropriately populate the templates under the different categories that your user is seeing, as well as for the technicians. So when they choose any request from here or from the same portal, so this is where you populate, or this is where you link the template to the appropriate category. So that's what service request is about. Let's talk about a typical example, such as user management. And I'm sorry. So let's talk about user management. So yesterday, Agassi was explaining how the users are onboarded, and how you map the department and everything, and how you set up login details for the users and everything, right? So what we are today going to see is, we are going to take an example of a new hire process, and we are going to see what are the available options that we have in the application to configure for requesting for information, as well as different ways of dynamically accepting inputs, dynamically mandating fields, as well as checking for specific information, or assigning it to groups, assigning it to technicians, and so on. So with, by saying that, let's start with the typical example of new hire process, because this is again, uh, in most of the IT fields, this is going to be a similar process. Like whenever a user is onboarding to a company, so there are a set of things that you need to do, right? Like creating an user account in the AD, providing them with mail accounts, and providing them with assets for their work, as well as deploying softwares for them to work efficiently for whatever the department they are hired for. So that's some workflow that every organization follows. So in our application, let's see how we can collect the information about a specific user, and how we can assign specific tasks to the respective technicians for them to complete their work, or for them to create appropriate things for the users, as well as we will go through, like if you have to provide some sort of asset to your users, end users, during their onboarding, how we can configure them, and what are the things that we have to offer, we'll be seeing them. Okay, so this is a typical template. This is an request template. So as you can see, so this is a default template that we provide out of the box for user management for new hire process. So let's talk about the different sections available. So when you open any template in Services Plus, you have to keep in mind that uh, there are two things in major. One is going to be the section, and another one is going to be the field that is populated. So where you can differentiate these things. So if you go to new field, you can see that you have single column or a double column. So what is single column and double column? So single column is going to be the this whole field. So you can see that the field is stretched all the way from left to right. So this is what single column means. If I mean double column, so it will be stretched only halfway, and the other half will be filled by another field. So that's what single column and double column means. And whenever you create a new column, that's gonna that's gonna separate the template into a different section. So let's say for an instance, if you want to collect user fields under a different section, and if you want to collect some other information in a different section, so this is where you confuse. So in this example, you can see that user details are populated. I mean, I have mentioned this as user details, and this is a double column, and I'm collecting information about the users. And if I scroll down, there is something called resource info. This is a different section, different one, but this is also considered as a section because this is completely separate or independent from whatever that we have configured over here. So if you take resources, I can see that I have different sections over here and different fields to choose from. So that's what a section is about. And field is nothing but the type of field that you use to collect the information. So field can be a single line field, single line field in the sense a single line. So you can see that I can type across this line. So if even if it exceeds this field length, it's not going to expand this field. So that's what single line field is. And multi-line field is, so the description is an example for a multi-line field. You can type line by line in this. And the other fields include like the numeric field, decimal field, pick list, date and time. So these are the fields that we provide out of the box. And populating fields on the template is as simple as dragging and dropping those fields over here. So I can drag and drop those fields from the available from the new field section. I can either do this, or if there is a scenario where certain information is common across all the things, because while we are starting, I mean at the start of the session, we have mentioned like for every service that you offer, there is also an associated incident your users might report. Right. So if that's the case, if you have some sort of common fields to configure, what you can do is, if you come over here in incident management or in service management, if you click on additional fields, over here you can add common fields. Both will be common for the incident as well as for the services. So with this in mind, so if you're creating templates for specific services, if you are creating common fields, then it will be easily available for you to in the template itself. Like you can drag and drop those fields. You can drag and let's say for an instance, if asset name is something common across, right? Across two different services, means you can create it as a common field, and it will be available under this available field, and you can simply drag and drop those fields in respective sections. For the service catalog, as well as if the similar kind of incident template is also available, you can also use the same common field. So this will allow you to uniquely configure the fields so that you can reuse the fields again and again without going through manual creation. Like you don't need to go through this section and you need to drag and drop. And if there are any mandations that you need to do or any default values that you need to provide, you don't need to go through these sections again and again. So that's why we have common fields. So whenever you have a scenario, or whenever you're setting up a new service or new uh, incident template, you have to keep in mind, if you can find there are uh, commonalities between the service and the incident, then go with the common fields and create common fields so that it will be available for both the services at the same time. Okay, so that's what so that's how you create fields under the template. And in this example, in this template, you can see that yes, you have any question? Okay. No, I think
Uh,
yes.
I have a question. So when we are using common fields, it's possible to have the attributes. So for example, default value for the common fields different on different forms. So like form specific, we can also give them values for the common fields, right?
I'm sorry. What do you mean by? Could you please let me know what you mean by common or default values?
So when you say common fields, these are the fields that we can use on multiple forms, right?
Yeah, that's correct. Yes.
Yeah, and for example, if we give them, so for, you said that you can provide the customizations, also you can copy the same on different forms. So for example, if you give a default value to a field, that
Mm-hmm.
would be copied to several forms. Now, if I don't want that, I want the default value to be different on different forms. Can that also be done for different forms, even if I'm using the common field?
Of course, you can manipulate that. There are a lot of ways that you can manipulate a field. A typical example would be field and form rules. Using this, you can manipulate any field that you want. So let's say, for an instance, if you want only the field name, like job title, to be common across the templates, of course you can configure job title as a common field, and you can reuse it across different templates. And if you want that field to be dynamic, and if you want to set different values for different templates, means you can make use of field and form rules. We see that field and form rules over here. So using
Mm-hmm.
this option, uh, you can create a rule. Like when it comes to field and form rules, it works in only on the browsers. So it's going to be more like front end scripting,
Okay.
because it depends upon the event that's happening on the template. So event, by I mean field load, field change, and the form
Mm-hmm.
submit. So these are the events that is already available. So what I mean by form load is, when I'm opening this, let's say, for me, if I'm opening request a CRM account, so I'm clicking on
Mm-hmm.
it and it's loading this form, right? So this is what I mean by form load. And what I
Yes.
mean by field change is, if I'm changing something on this drop down, or if I'm typing something on the subject, that's called field change. So in your example, you want to dynamically add or remove information from a specific field. So if that is going to be a static value depending upon the template, then of course you can create a rule on load itself. And if there is any condition associated, uh, you can choose the specific condition that is already available on this list, and based upon that, you can set the values. You can set the field to be a different one. Like, you can choose the field that you want. So our example was job title. You can set the value of job title to be engineer. If I have a condition uh, set as engineer, and it's going to be on form load. And for the condition, let's go with the department is not sure what other departments I have. Give me a minute. So I can say, like, if the department is administrator, then set the job title to be engineer. Okay. And also what I'm going to do is, I'm going to go back to technician, and I'm going to set the department as uh, administrator. So I'm going to save this for now. And if I'm using this, you know, this template, request to start a process. if I'm using this template, so during the form load, so we can see that the job title is empty over here. But if I load this template, you can see that the job title is set as engineer. So I can go with multiple conditions on the template. So I can go with any conditions or any combination of conditions. And I can dynamically add the information on the template uh, while changing the fields or during the load itself. So if you have a use case like you want to pre-populate something, you can go with the form load and you can dynamically add the information on the go.
Okay. Yep. Got it. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. I think someone pinged on the chat. Let me check. Yeah, because you haven't answered it. So yeah, guys. So that's what common field is about. And moving on, so we have seen like these are the different values that we had to offer. So you can go with a combination of fields depending upon the requirement of your customer. And let's say for an instance, when you configure things on the template, you have to keep in mind you will always be populating the fields on the technician section, because uh, when you are working on the template, when you are trying to populate certain information for the requesters. So let's say for an instance, if you are creating a new field, entirely new field, you can see that for requester we have removed the option to add a new field. The reason being is always whenever you are creating a new field, it should have to be done from the technician view, because you cannot create a field for the request and make it unavailable for the technician, right? But it works on the other way. So you can create as many fields for the technician, and you can only populate the fields that your requester needs. So for an instance, uh, the requester doesn't necessarily need to know uh, the specific configuration, or if you have an if you have okay, let's take this example. So if you have a need, like you don't want your customers to set the priority, because there are chances all the requesters will end up filing the request in high priority, believing that their issue will be resolved soon, right? So they will always end up choosing the priority to be high. If you don't want that to happen, you can remove that field for the user, as well as you can disable the option so that requester cannot set the field. You can disable these options. If you disable these options, your users or requesters will not be able to set this field. So when you're controlling the fields, you have to keep in mind you will be creating fields on the technician view, post which if you want certain information to be available to the requester for collecting from them, then in that case you can copy from the technician. You can copy all the fields, or you can copy the respective fields from the technician, and when you copy, it's going to bring up all the fields, and if you want to remove any, you can go ahead and remove the fields that you want. You can remove as such. So whenever you're configuring, this is one thing that you have to make sure, like when you're editing or modifying things on the template, when you're wondering why you're not able to create the fields, you have to keep in mind that that's something you have to create on the technician view first. All right, so moving on. So we have seen what a section is, and we have seen the different fields. Let's talk about resource images. So this is something that we brought recently. So resource images again is going to give prominence on the images and the information that you provide to the user or the technician or whoever is filing or treating the request, and that will help them on choosing their they need for the service. So if there is a scenario that you want to provide configuration details about and specific asset, you can do that. You can provide the details. Okay, this is an Dell laptop, and the model is so and so, and these are the configuration. Or if it's going to be a Mac or HP or a different laptop, you can provide the configurations from the resources as well. So that's what resource info is, and this gonna give you the prominence on the images, as well as you get to customize things that you can populate to the user. So we'll be seeing that. Let's take a look at the resource information then. So these are some of the default, resource questions that is available. So if you want to go with new questions, you can of course create the questions depending upon the available options. Whether you want them to be a radio button or checkbox, you can go with that. Or else, if you have created the questions already, you can of course drag and drop, or you can choose them right from here. And if you want to make any changes to the existing questions, you can click on the edit icon and you can make the changes over here. So in resource images, you can upload new images from your available images list, or your icons. You can upload new icons. And as I mentioned, though, you can provide more information about a specific resource. You can so this description field is similar to that of the description that you see on the request field. So you can highlight text, you can change the color, you can choose fonts, and you can provide information in a more presentable way to your user. So it will be easy for them to understand what specific asset is and what are the configuration it has to offer. You can pretty much configure everything in this list of in this questions. And so this is where, and as I mentioned, this is when you add a new question, you can add them manually, or there is also an option when the product is already available. So when let's say for an instance you have performed inventory already in the application. If that's the case, if you want to pull that information, you can also pull the information from the product list. So you can see that. So these are few of the machines that already I have inventoried in my end. So inventory list is gonna give me both the software and the hardware availability. So you can see that. So this is a machine that I have already inventoried. So I can choose from the list of products, as well as the software list will also be available for me. So when you're onboarding, when you have restrictions to the softwares as well, you can choose a list of softwares for your users, whoever is onboarding, and you can provide that to over there as well as a resource. So that this is where you add the questions. And as I mentioned, you have a lot of options to go with, and also you can choose whatever the image as well. And if there are any cost associated with that, if there are any costs associated with the specific service that you're offering, you can also enable cost, and you can provide the cost for them independently. So let's say for instance, if a laptop is going to cost higher, you can also update that information on the cost details, and that will be available for the technician, and the technician or the viewer, and they will be able to take action depending upon the service that your end user is requesting for. So this is the list that will be available. So when onboarding, the HR or the hiring manager will be able to fill this information, and they will choose the respective hardwares that they need and the softwares that the user requires in order to complete their task. And in addition to that, if your organization is offering communication devices for them, you get to choose them, and you will be able to populate those information as well in a single shot. And there is one more thing that I want to mention when it comes to user onboarding. uh, we have a dedicated field called editor. So what this editor field is, uh, this editor field will allow a non-technician to fill in all the information, okay, for once. So let's say for an instance, if HR is going to raise, or they are going to start the onboarding process, means they will be using this template, and HR might not know all the information about their workflow or the asset needs for a specific user, right? So in those cases, what you can do is you can add this field. So again, this is something that needs to be enabled in the backend. When this editor field is enabled, and if the HR populates the hiring manager information on the editor field, the hiring manager will be able to choose the software and the hardware that is needed for the technician to provide and work on. Can any technician, so Akshay, I have a question. Can any technician except admin be able to edit the template, or is it technician? Of course, the roles, so it depends upon the role that you're providing. So editing the templates and the requests also depending upon the role. So yesterday on user onboarding, you might have seen roles. So when it comes to editing templates and everything, so this is where you configure like what are the things or what are the roles that you want to provide. So in general, a help desk admin, help desk config. This will allow you to configure request related configurations. And in addition to that, SD admin is going to have complete control over it, and SD site admin will also have complete control over the templates uh, for their respective sites. So these are certain roles that you need to assign to your technicians. So whenever you change someone as a technician, so it is mandatory to update their roles as well, because you don't want to provide the complete access. So this is where you provide the roles. Okay, yeah, the login is not enabled for this one. Let me choose another. Let me choose this one. So you can see that the roles are available over here. So this is where you configure the respective roles. All right. Yeah. So that's what. Yeah, we were discussing about the editor. So that's what the editor field is about. So let's take a look at the editor field. So for instance, so this is, so I'm a user now. So I don't have much of control over the template, right? So if I'm starting a new hire process, I will not be able to choose everything, or I don't know all this information in a single shot, right? And also the user will also doesn't also know what are the software that he needs, right? So if that's the case, I can add this person as an you know editor, and I will be able to collect information from them. So what I can do is I can simply raise a request in user management request to start a new hire process. And I'm assuming, Apache is going to initiate the process, and the editor is going to be this person, and the employee name. Uh, and department administration approvers, if there are any approvers. So we'll see this later. Location, yeah, let's say something random. Phone number, let's say something random. So as a, assume that I'm not a technician, assume that I'm a HR, so I don't know what software or what are the things that this user needs. So I'm gonna create a request just like that, because I don't know what are the things that I need. But what I have done is, while during the creation, I have added this person as an editor. Okay? So this will give me an opportunity. You can see that in the home page, it's showing as awaiting for update. So this will give me an opportunity to edit this request once. So this is not something created by me. So technically, I should not be able to see this. But since I have enabled this as an editor and I have allowed this user, this is available for me now. And if I edit this, I'll be able to modify the information that I need. So if I want to do something, put some information over here, I can do that. If I need any sort of resources, I can choose them. Like I need Chrome, I need Outlook, I need Firefox, I need this as well. And communication, yeah, this guy needs iPhone, iPad, help desk, Active Directory, CRM. So I can edit this and I can update it. This will work only once. So the moment I update it, the edit field will disappear for me, and I will not be able to change anything post that. So let's take a look at over here. Let's see if it's completed. Yeah, it's completed. Now you can see that all the resource information is populated. So whatever the things that we selected by the requester or a different user is now populated on the template. and now your technicians will know that what are the things that they need to provide. So that's what this special field editor is about. You can see that the edit option now disappears. So no matter what I do, I cannot modify this moving forward. So when you're configuring this, you have to keep in mind that the edit field will work only once, and after the edit is completed, the edit option will disappear for the respective person, and they will no longer be modify or do anything on the template. Okay, so that's what editor field is. And yeah, resource questions, we have seen it just on resource questions. Cost, yeah, that's what cost is about. And yeah, this is also an important place where you configure templates. So in scenarios, you will not be showing all the templates to all the users, right? So you will be showing the templates or the services depending upon the group, either for the technicians, either if it's going to be the technician, it's going to be the support group that you configure. If it's going to be the users, it's going to be the user groups. So user groups usually depends upon the you know, criteria that's already available, such as site, department, email ID, or job title. So these are the predefined filters that you can go with for user groups. And for technicians, of course, you can manually map the technicians, because technician numbers is not going to be that high. So you can map those support group details or support technician details in the support groups over here. There are no restrictions when it comes to mapping that. So if you populate only for the selected groups, it will be only visible to them. And if the user doesn't belong to any specific group, then that specific template will not be available to them. As well as if you disable this option, show to requester, this field will also not be available for that specific user. So if you want to restrict only HR to see that, you can provide, your HR will have the job title is human resource manager, something like that. And if you have created a user group, you can populate it only for them. So the rest of the users will not be able to see that option. Okay, so that's what the configuring the visibility over here is. And let's take a look at workflow and what are the things that this has to offer. So in our example, I mentioned like you take any request, service or incident, you will have a certain workflow. There are scenarios that you need to get approval for doing certain things, like procurement or providing an asset, uh, those kind of things. As well as even if it's an incident, you may need to get an approval on performing certain actions or take certain actions on an asset or on a IT device. So you need to get an approval. Right? Excuse me. So in workflow, this is where you configure those kind of things. Um, when it comes to service request, it's going to be very predefined, because in a nutshell, you know what the service is and who's going to be the approver. And after the approval, what you want to do, and before the approval, what you want to do. So all those kind of things that you can configure under the workflow. Give me one moment. Let me see if I have example image to show you guys. Yep, I have one. Okay, so we have an image. One moment, guys. I'm just loading an image, and I'll show you what I mean by workflow. So yeah, in the meantime, while it's uploading, so this is where you configure the approvals. You can either configure them on the workflow, or else if you remember on the template also there is an approval section over here. So let's say for an instance, if you know a certain approval is not available on any given day, and if you want to perform, or if you want to get approved with a different person, you will be able to choose the approvals over here. Okay. Yeah, that's uploaded. So I hope you can see the image. So this is a typical workflow or the list of services available with us. So this is your end user, and these are your technicians, and your users can communicate with you or request for service or report incident in numerous ways, ranging from email, chat, web form to form. And the technicians get to choose what kind of service or what kind of incident they are reporting, and depending upon the outcome of each and everything, it's going to result in certain things, right? So let's take service requests, since we are discussing this. So when it comes to service requests, you can see that when your user is requesting for something, to deliver a service, we have a process and workflow, right? So that's what I mean by workflow. And we can also expand this. Unfortunately, I think I don't have that image with me. So workflow depends upon depends upon the approval and rejection. So if a certain thing is approved, we can process that service. If it's rejected, we can straight away notify the user like, hey, this has been rejected by so and so, so I have to check with them and so on. So by configuring this workflow in the best efficient way, this will minimize the SLA that your technicians had to burden and take on, as well as this is gonna streamline the process of the IT service that you're offering. So you can have up to 6 stages of approval, 6 or 5 stages. Let me just check that. Yeah, you can have up to 5 stages of approval, and depending upon who is going to be the approver for the respective service that your user is requesting for, you can configure that over here. Can you see my screen? I can even confirm if you can see the screen.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm under workflow. Hope you can see workflow tab, right? All right, thank you so much. Thank you for checking that. All right, so so this is the list of, the workflow where you can configure different stages of approvers, and different stages. There are scenarios, you wanna get an approval from your lead first, and then you wanna get an approval from the manager. If that's the case, if there are list of approvers needed, then you can configure different stages over here. So when it comes to approvers, you can directly add depending upon the provision that you provided for the user. Like in the user account, you will be able to make someone as an approver, or else you can also create rules, and you can assign approvals depending upon that. So if you don't want to go with more complex way, like defining or making the approval as a static information, if you want that to be dynamic, if the approvals are going to be changing over the period of time, then you can go with the roles. So while you're seeing the user onboarding, you might have seen roles. If in case if you have missed, let me show you what roles is. Here it is. organization roles. So this is the role that is populated on this section. If you scroll down all the way to the bottom, if you exclude the users, so these are the list of roles available for us, like department approvers, department in charge, head, so on and so forth. So you can map the users directly on the role itself. Let's say if Agassi is going to be Agassi is the CEO of your organization, you can add him as the CEO right over here. And if the CEO is going to change over the period, you don't need to go through each and every template to update that. You can simply go to the roles and you can edit the specific role and you can change it over there so that it will reflect on all the templates wherever you have configured. So this is one good way that you can map the information for the approvers. And enabling users, so if it's going to be a user who will be the approver, you need to go to the user account. So you need to choose the user and you need to edit that user and you need to enable this option. So service request approver or purchase approval, depending upon where you want to provide them with access, you need to enable this option. And if they have any limitation when it comes to approvals, let's say for instance, you don't want them to be the approval for $1 million project needs, you can enable the cost and you can provide the amount over here so that when the amount exceeds this limit, this is going to this will not allow them to approve on that, so that you will be able to complete the next stage approval and you can go further.
Okay. Armugam, so here,
Yes.
in the previous case screen where you're showing the limit, is it the the total limit or limit per request?
Per request, actually.
Per request. Okay.
Yeah.
So this is not for the whole like.
No, no, we will not be calculating or we will not be keeping track of how much a certain person have approved for services. So it's going to be the limit for a request per request.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah. So that's where so we can configure the approvers, and also there are scenarios where you can take action if you get approval from any one of them, right? So you don't need to wait for all of the users to approve a certain request. So if you want to take action on first approval, you have the option to do that. Or if you want to wait until all of them approves, of course you can enable the option all approvers must approve the service request. And one other good thing when it comes to service request is going to be the assignment of the request to the technicians after the approval. So this will, so when this option is enabled, the SLA will not be calculated on the ticket until unless the request is approved. So if it's rejected or if it's pending for approval, if you don't want that to be assigned to the technician, you can enable this option. So this is gonna help the IT teams to complete the things on their SLA if they are waiting for approval. So that's what the approval details is about in workflow. And let's talk about checklist. So checklist is a new feature that we brought recently. So checklist is nothing but, typically when we are performing certain actions, we will have so Anil have a question. Can we set approval based upon conditions based on values selected on the form? Yes, Nazia, the approvers are sequential. Parallel in the sense, yes, you can send the approval across all the approvers in a shot, selected on the request form. Anil. Okay, so Anil have a question, like he wants to know if we can set approval based upon the values. There are a lot of ways, Anil, you can approach this specific scenario on adding the approvers. So let me give you a few of the examples on what are the options that you have to approach this. Uh, One is going to be the scripting, going to the scripting side and adding the approvers after the request creation, depending upon the request details. So if you are checking for certain criteria or specific subjects or any groups, and if you want to add approvals based upon that, then of course you can go with scripting and you can add the approvers in that way. Or also you can, I believe you can also use the business rules. If the uh, using the business rules, you can define or you can choose categories and you can set the template, I believe. Okay, I should check on actions. Um, okay, available over here. Yeah. Yeah, I think the template option is available only for the instant. Okay, so if dynamic approver is needed, probably you can go with the field and form rules. That is again one other option where you can choose the approvers. Submit. You can select the list of approvers that you want dynamically using the field and form rules. So this is again one other approach that you can configure for the approvers. So if the approver list over here is not going to satisfy your need, then of course you can go with the field and form rules and you can set the approvers while you're submitting the form depending upon the conditions that you see on the request. So that's one other approach. And also with business rules, of course, with some amount of coding, we have brought in few features such as request custom functions. Uh, this is again user friendly scripting language that you can do right on the application itself. So using this also, you will be able to send the approvers. So there are different ways that you can approach this. I hope that clarifies your doubt, Anil. Right? Yeah, thank you. And Nazia, yeah, you're welcome. Nazia, these approvers sequential. Yeah, as I mentioned, so the approvers you can configure either to be sequential, or if you want to trigger only after the approval, you can also do that. So
So I mean, the requirements, Nazia here, the requirement here is like sometimes what happens based on whatever the user select on the request. So it may happen that suppose they are asking for certain resources, and based on what they select, they might ask the approval to be sent to maybe 2 or 3 different departments in parallel for the resource approvals. So can something like that be done?
yes, in parallel, of course, you can do that. So if you see this option, so when send approval automatically when the request is you know created. So in stage one means it will always remain on pending, and after the stage one is completed, it will go to the second approver. But in parallel, in the sense you want to trigger everything in a single shot. So let's say for an
Yeah.
instance, if okay, yeah, let me confirm that. If you are sending it in parallel, you can configure all of them in the stage one itself, right, Nazia?
Okay, all the roles in one stage, right?
Yeah, in
Or
stage one itself, you can configure everyone. And
hmm,
in the stage one itself, if you enable the option, all approvers must approve, then it will wait for the approval of them. And once they approve, it will move to the next stage. If
okay.
yeah.
And sorry, Arumugam, is it also possible to create a task before an approval, or will it always happen so that whenever you're raising a request, the approval will go first and then the task?
Task, of course, you can associate on the template itself directly, or if you want to create it dynamically, of course, there are ways you can dynamically create the task as well after the approval.
Or before the approval as well. So if we want that the service request is raised and then a task is created, then some approval goes, and then again a task is created, and something like that be also done.
Yes, of course, that can be achieved, but then again, it also requires amount of coding, or you have to utilize uh, the request custom function, which I mentioned. So request custom function will allow you to uh, technically invoke an API call. So you can, with the help of APIs, you will be able to create tasks on the go, depending upon the criteria or the rule. So let's say, for an instance, if I'm just assume that I have created a function to create a task, okay, and I'm configuring these tasks under business role. And in business role, technically, you will be able to choose whatever the criteria that you want, right? I can choose
Mm-hmm.
who this is, or approval status is this. So you can choose any criteria that you want. And after, when meeting the criteria, initially you have seen options like execute, script, and do this, do that, right? So in the latest build, we have brought in execute custom functions. So using this, of course, you can execute the function itself directly, and that function is going to make the API call, and that's gonna uh, dynamically create the tasks on the go.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yep. Got it. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. All right. So let me head back. And yeah, so we have seen, yeah, we were discussing about checklist. So yeah, checklist is nothing but a list of things your technician needs to make sure before he completes certain things. It could be a task, or it could be closing a request. So when he is working on it, you can say, like, have you checked whether the entry is already in the Active Directory or not? Or have you checked if the email address have any alias associated? If your technician needs to perform any sort of checks like that, you can create checklist and you can associate it with the template. So when they are finishing, or when they are completing the request, they can go through the checklist. They can say, like, they can check the things that they need to do. They can say, like, okay, I have completed this, I have completed this, I have completed this. And when they complete, this is gonna verify it. Okay, so he have checked everything before he completed the request, or before he completed his task. So that's something that you can configure on the template directly over here. So that's what checklist is about. And you can associate it. If you have multiple checklists configured, you can associate, of course, or you can remove them. You can check this and you can remove them. And so this is what task is. This is where you configure the task by default. So when it comes to service requests, the tasks are going to be pretty much same, because it's going to be an uniform process that you will be carrying out to complete it. So pretty much for the service request, you can configure the task directly on the template itself. You can create multiple tasks over here. Either from here you can create the task, or you can go to admin and you can add it as a template over here directly. And from here you can map the tasks on the template. So you can add the task, you can assign the technicians directly, or you can assign the groups. And after the approval or after the request creation, you can carry forward. Either the task has to be triggered, or either you need to wait for certain things that you can configure. In addition to that, you can also organize the task. Like, you can move the task up or down, or if there are any dependencies. Like, so if I say active entry in Active Directory, after that I cannot create any email before the entry in Active Directory, right? So that's again going to be a dependency for email creation. So if that's the case, I can go to dependencies and I can mark that. So after this task only, the email creation should trigger. So I can map it in the dependencies so that it will work accordingly. Uh, okay, so if an approver have left an organization, let's say he's in level 1, automatic notification to replace the user account in approver. Yeah, I said have a question like when a user left an organization, and if they are configured on level 1, will the application notify them? I said unfortunately I have not tested that specific scenario. So I will test it and I'll keep you posted on that, Isaac. Okay. So when an specific user or is removed from stage 1, I think it will not affect the template as long as the secondary approvers are there. So let's say for an instance, if I configure only, let me configure. That's okay. So if this is the case, I can check by the stage 1 will automatically remove from the list, but I don't think we'll be having a notification. But let me check that and confirm that for you guys. And Anil have another question. For example, in stage 1, if we have 10 approvals, and out of 10 approvals, we need at least 5 before proceeding to the next step. Unfortunately, Anil, we don't have option like how many approvers can approve. Either you can go with all approvers, like everyone configured on the stage should approve, or else you may need to go with approval on first action. So let's say for an instance, in stage 1, if one person approves and if you want to move to next stage, that you can configure. But unfortunately, we don't have the option to go with a percentage like min or max. We don't have that percentage when it comes to approvals. Yes, Isaac, that's correct. In this case, the approval 2 will take precedence, but we had to test that, like I said, and I will notify you on that as well. What if we want to create an instance from service request is approval is approved, then the task. Akshay, yes, from the service request, you can convert, you have the ability to convert this into a service request. If you want to create an incident, then of course, with the help of the custom actions, you will be able to create, you can create a new custom menu, and from there you will be able to create custom things. You will be able to achieve that. It's not something impossible, but with the current configuration and out of the box available options, you can only convert a request into service request into an incident, but not create. But of course you can achieve that using custom features. So you guys can think custom functions as an super useful option. So when you are stuck in a specific situation, and if the out of the box options is not available, you can think of custom functions as helping hands where you can extrapolate the existing business logics to accommodate the ones that your customer or end user is requesting for. So we have predefined, or we have certain ways, we have configured certain things based upon ITIL. So if the customer is needing or having a business logic that our application is not providing out of the box, then of course you can think of the custom functions or custom triggers, or using the API, you will be able to achieve most of the scenarios. Like for 99% or 90% of the scenarios, you will be able to achieve. So provided that if the API is available. So if the API, you can check the API documentation. If you have API for request or change, if that's available, then of course you will be able to almost uh, you know uh, work on any sort of scenarios that your user is providing. All right. So moving on, let's
Armugam Som here. Just one quick question.
Mhm.
When you added the fields for creating a service request, do we have a field level visibility option?
Can you give me an example?
Say for one service request, it might be used across multiple teams. So probably I don't want them to have an option to select, say, Apple laptop for one particular team, and it should be only Windows. So can we restrict it, the field visibility for different teams?
Yes, of course. You have a lot of options to restrict the visibility. Uh, the one I would highly recommend is to go with field informed rules. And using the field informed rules, depending upon the criteria or the request or the team, so we have a lot of conditions. So this is what I mean by criteria. You can choose whatever the criteria that you want, and depending upon that, you can remove options. So you see that. So there are a lot of things to go with in the field informed rules. You can remove a certain option. If you choose remove option, over here we have the laptop model. So you want only Dell to be available, means you can remove the other options. You can remove Apple and HP, and I'm not providing any height criteria. For testing, I'm just naming it as height, and I'm saving it. And if a requester or even a technician, because over here I have set it for all the users, so even if a technician is creating this request, he cannot choose Apple. You can see that only Dell is available for him. So you can pretty much restrict what information that your user needs to choose using the field informed rules. So there are a lot of events. There are 3 events to go with: load, change, or submit. So depending upon what criteria that you want to choose, you can show the field, you can hide the field, remove the option, disable the field itself. You have a lot of options to go with in field informed rules.
Okay, sure. Thanks.
Yeah, you're welcome. All right. So, yeah, we were talking about task details.
Hi Arumugam, Pooja
Mhm.
here. I do have one question.
Yes.
Do we have a delegate or something backup feature for approving the SRs and all? Like, suppose we want to delegate the rights for approving the tickets to some other person. So those kind of feature is there?
Delegating in the sense you want to provide privilege for them to approve a certain request and should restrict from other users, something like that.
Yes, correct.
Yeah, when it comes to service or purchase request approvers, of course, you need to add them as an approver on their profile so that it will be available for them. So if you go inside the profile, you see that you need to choose them as an approver. So by default, this will all of the users will not be populated. So if I go to uh, the request catalog, so this is the template that we are working on. So in this workflow, I cannot see this user.
Okay.
Uh, this. Yeah, I cannot see this user, or I cannot see Alex Moore, for example. I cannot see him over there. So if I want this to be available, this is going to be the privilege or the accessibility for that specific user to approve a certain thing. So you need to enable this purchase request approver or service request approval if it's going to be service request. And after enabling that only, I can see.
Mm-hmm.
So if I refresh, then he will be available over here. Alex Moore is available. So this is where you configure. And if you're talking about backup approvers, of course you can configure the backup approvers. So when you go to home page, you have something called backup approver, and if you know that certain technician is not going to be available on a certain day, you can configure the backup approver over here. So let's say that administrator will not be available in this date to date, so you can configure the backup approver over here. So whatever the approval that he have in this specific date range will be moved to this person, and he gets to approve the request.
Okay. So backup feature is like that the rights of the previous person will be moved to the backup resource, is it?
Exactly, that's correct. Again, you need to enable the option for them.
No, so the other question is my point. I mean, at the same point, both the user cannot have approve the tickets, right?
Exactly. So they don't. Both of them doesn't need to approve. So any stage that needs to be approved by administrator will be carried forward by the other technician in his place.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Got. Thank you.
Welcome. Yes, of course, you can send SMS notifications as well. So when you enable SMS notification, okay, the business rule, his customers notification will log in. If you want to get notified via SMS for any service request, of course, you can create a new business rule and you can notify via SMS for each and every service request that is filed. Let me see or check if it is also available out of the box. Yeah, by default, most of the things will be email, but let me check and confirm you what will happen for SMS. Yeah, of course, whenever a ticket is created, you can notify your technicians via SMS as well. So you have that option out of the box. Okay.
Arumugam Shyam here. I have a question about the approvers. So
Yes.
you have been adding individual users as approvers, multiple individual users. Is there an option to add a user group?
Yes, of course, you have the option to add user groups. So as I shown, if you go to organizational roles, you can create a role for that group of approvers. You can configure them over here, and you can send out approvals. So group in the sense, can you give me an example? Like what do you mean by group? Like if you want to notify multiple users?
Yeah, maybe users in that particular group. Suppose there is an IT group or admin group. So there may be multiple admins in that group. So rather than going with individual names, I will just assign to that group.
Unfortunately, it may not send for a specific group because we need to provide them with approval access on the account level. But using the roles also, I believe you will be able to choose them depending upon the criteria. Yeah, I think you will be able to only choose them depending upon the criteria. I'll check that, Sean. I'll check that and I'll keep you posted. So for sending approval for a specific group, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. Certainly, I will check that, and within the end of the day, I will update you guys for that.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Yeah. So again, so Nazia have a question like an end user be selected as approvers. So that's again depends upon who is requesting for a certain thing. By default, you need to enable the specific user with that privilege to approve for a certain request in order for you to select that user. Because even though you try to configure them under the approver list or under the template directly, you need to provide them with the approval access on the user account level, so that only you will be able to configure them. So it doesn't necessarily need to be a technician. So for the end user as well, it is available, but you need to enable the privilege for them. It's not a role. It's an option under the user account. So whenever you edit any user account, so for this user account, if you want them to be in service request approver, you have to go inside their account and you need to enable this option, service request approver. If you enable this, then it will certainly allow you to choose this end user as an approver. So it need not Snoopy and technician. Even the user or requester will be able to approve the request, provided that this option is enabled for them. All right. Yeah, so service catalog again. So we were talking about the workflows. If we look into task details, so you may have a scenario like you don't want to populate each and everything to your end user or end technician, right? You want to restrict access to what the information that they are seeing on their task. So if that's the case, if you want to perform that, then of course using the tasks you can pretty much control what information needs to be available for your technicians. You will be able to choose from the list of available properties and have it populated to your user. So for to create an entry on the Active Directory, you don't need to provide them with what laptop model the user is going to use, right? So you can restrict that information. So when the task is assigned to the specific request, I'm sorry, specific technician. So these are the certain tasks. You can see that if I open the task, not all the information will be available for me. Only the information that I need to work on, like who's the requester, what his title is, and which department he belongs to, and so on and so forth. So whatever the thing that I choose on the template for the task, this is the only information that your technician will see. So this is where you control the restriction for the task, like what information that he needs to finish his job or complete his job. You can pretty much configure them over here if you want to restrict in such a way, so that you can configure over here. That's what task is about. And even in the tasks also, if you want to trigger them after the approval, or if you want to manually trigger the task, you can do that. You can trigger the tasks manually. You can create all of them and you can add them on the request, and depending upon your need you can manually trigger them, or after the approval you can trigger all the tasks, so your technicians will be able to work on that. And template action is something that will be available for you if in case if you're integrating our other solutions as well. So we have a lot of solutions for user management. IT in general, we have a lot of solutions. So one of them is going to be ADMP, as Jay have shown you certain examples yesterday. So within a click, you will be able to configure user accounts right from the template. So if that specific solution is integrated with the application, from here itself, you will have that custom action under the AD Manager Plus, and from here you can create user in AD, and this will populate the user details, capturing from the request, and it will allow you to create user accounts on the go. So if in case if you're integrating, you will be you will be pretty much seeing all of these, most of the integrations on your last day of training session with Jai. So he will be handling the integration part, and he will be showing you all of these options, available options over here. All right, guys. So that's what workflow is, and this is how you configure things for easy access of your technicians and providing them with the information that they need to work on. So this is why you configure most of the things. And moving on, field and form rules, pretty much as I mentioned. So field and form rule is something that you need to keep in mind, that it works only on the browser. This is not something that happens on the back end. This happens only on the browser, that too when the form is active. So what I mean by form is active is, so this is a typical request. Right now the form is not active, I would say, because the form is not loaded. If I edit this request, and if the field is loaded in this particular way, this is what form is loaded means. So it has to be loaded in such a way, in this way, so that any configuration that you have on the field and form rule will take effect. So when you're configuring field and form rule, you have to first check always whether the form is loaded or not. If it is loaded, then pretty much any action that you take, depending upon the rules that you configured on the field and form rule, that will take effect. So that's what field and form rule is. You guys can go through with the specific examples and the list of actions available. There are a lot of actions to go with. Even if you are not finding the options that you're seeing over there, you can also execute scripts as well. If you have any expert in JavaScript, you can pretty much write any JavaScripts over here. Like for example, alert something, you know, if you want to provide such an alert when they miss something, is an example for JavaScript. Condition, let's say priority is empty. So I'm saying that if the priority is empty, alert you missed a field, something like that. Okay, and let me create a new ticket. User management, request for new hire process. Have I configured it on load? Yeah. So alert is something that we need while we are submitting. So let me change it to submit. Okay. So this is a typical form. So let me fill in this information. Okay, so most of the information are populated. So priority, you can see the priority is not mandatory over here. Okay, after alert, I should also stop the form submission. So for stopping, use this. If you want to alert the user and if you want to prevent the form to be submitted, you can configure something like that. And when they are submitting the request, they'll get an alert like, hey, you missed a field. And they can, if you have mentioned the field, then they will be able to check what field that is, and they will be able to modify the field, post which they will be able to submit it successfully. So you can pretty much control what information that you need to be filed on the request. You can pretty much control everything over here for the end users during the form creation or editing. So that's what field and form rule. So pretty much this is similar for the incident as well. So whatever that you see on service request, will also be available on instant request with some changes. So some changes in the sense, what I mean by some changes is, when it comes to approval, you will not have the automatic approval list for the instant request, because in the incidents we will get to know who is going to approve for certain thing. The user may report something like my internet is not working, so as simple as they will say something like that. So if it's something to do with routers, we will file that to that specific hardware team. If it's something to do with the network team, then the requester for that will be different. So approval for instant will be configured only after the request creation. So after the instant request is created, you can go inside the request, and from here you will be able to submit for approval manually from here. Or if you want to go with business rules and if you want to dynamically do something, of course you can configure that as well. Akshay have a question. So he have asked what will be the execution order of the field and form rule. So field and form rule, as I mentioned, it's something that works on the browser on the field directly. So it is not directly connected with the database. Okay, so it's not connected directly with the database. I can say like that. Okay, so whenever you perform certain action using the field and form rule, after saving, if you have some other action that is configured on a different rule, such as business rule, technician auto assign, category auto assign. So these are some examples of the assignment action, for example. So you can also override information after something is encoded into the server, right? So field and form rule is like a client side working. So on the client only, those action will be available. After submitting, if you have corresponding or a different action that has to be performed using business rule, like I can say like in the field and form rule, I can say like I want to set a certain field as, or I want to set the category to be so and so. If the subject contains the word network in it, I can do that. Of course, with the field and form rules, I'll be able to populate that. But with the field and form rule, I'm sorry, with the business rule, if you want to override that information, if I want to check for a specific email, like if the email is from this guy, I want to place this in a group, like I want to move this to a different group, or if I want to change the category, of course I can do that. But business rule executes after field and form rule. So whatever that you configured on business rule, if both of the actions are going to be same, business rule will take precedence and the field and form rule will not, because that's like more like client side and this happens on the server. So field and form rule will happen before submitting certain things to the application. Business rule will execute at the time of updating things to the database. So it will check for these rules and it will make the changes necessary changes accordingly, and it will take the actions. So there is an order for this as well. So first, whatever that you configure will happen on field and form rule, because that's where you take action in the UI. And then the next thing is going to be business rule. If you have business rule executes before the request creation or before making the changes to the database. So if you are changing anything on the request, we will update that information in the database. So in the object level, business rule will take precedence and it will make the changes accordingly. And post which, there are also other things, other rules associated, such as custom triggers. If you are extrapolating certain functions and if you are executing certain scripts, of course, custom trigger takes precedence and it will execute accordingly. And it will override any information written by business rule if they are conflicting. And when it comes to ticket assignment to the technicians, technician auto assign, category auto assign, these things will take precedence, because on the object level these will complete. After the creation, these things will kick in and they will act accordingly. If you're talking purely about the rules, like manipulating the category and those things, I would say first field and form rule will take effect, and then the second business rule, and the third will be custom triggers. If you want to arrange it on priority, the most priority or the higher the priority goes to custom trigger next to the business rule. The third will be the failed inform rules. Yeah, you're welcome. Can we control the visibility of the service request to specific users? Yes, Nadia, of course you can configure the visibility of the service to specific users. So in the request template itself, you can choose either show to all requesters. You can see that you can show all of them, or if you have configured specific user groups and if you want this to be available only to them, you can choose the groups over here, and this will be available only for those specific users. Anil have a question. Can we fetch data from database server side in the client side? Yes, Anil, of course, you will be able to fetch information provided that APIs are available and if they are already in the application. So it's arbitrary. Like, let's say for an instance, if you have if you have an workflow, like if you want to uh, get an asset specific information and want to populate, pretty much asset information will be available when you click on that. But let's say for an argument, if you want to get the domain name of an asset, something like that, and if you want that to be available on the request, and if you want to make an API call, of course with our available API systems you will be able to use the field and form rules, and you will be able to make API calls using execute script option. So you have something called execute script. You will be able to write jQuery functions because our application comes bundled with jQuery. You can use jQuery functions as well as native JavaScript. You will be able to write native JavaScript functions, and you will be able to make API calls to the respective database provided it have APIs. If not, if you're getting it from our application itself, if we have that API available, of course you can make that call. You can fetch the information and you can append them on the template or on the request directly while creating a request or while submitting the request. Of course you can do that. So yeah, all right. So that's what field informed rule is. An instant we have seen, as I mentioned, so we will not be having the approvals. But apart from that, all the other things will be similar, like task, triggering task, checklist, and most of the things will remain same across both of the request and service management and mapping the information. So when it comes to service, you will be mapping the template by going to the catalog or the category directly, and you will be creating over there. But when it comes to incident, it's a little bit different. You will be mapping them where it says service category. So when you say that you want to populate this under data management, and if you save this, the application crashes frequently will be only available on that specific category, data management. So if I go to report an issue and if I go to data management, this is the only place it will be available where the users can choose application crashes frequently and they can find the report. So that's service category mapping. And yeah, so most of the things remains the same for the incident. We have brought in customization options as well for the service for the request management templates. So this again helps you to customize the things if your customer is looking for certain color or fonts for them on the template. Of course, you can customize them over here in the form. If you want to change the background color, you can see that there are a lot of customizations available. You can choose the font colors, and you can go with your choice. It's up to you. You can choose any combination that you want, and the label placement or the font that you're using. So you'll be able to pretty much customize everything or most of the things on this form. So we have brought in this feature. So you can customize that, and if you want to rename these sections, you can edit this and you can rename the sections over here. So that's what customization has to offer. And also from here itself, you can independently customize certain sections. You will be able to do them. So that's what customization option is. Moving on, we have we have seen what are the ways that we can create incident requests and service request, right? So let us talk about few things on how we can perform business logics on the request. So business logics in the sense manipulating the request, moving to specific categories, or assigning it to technicians, SLAs, so on and so forth. We have a lot of things to cover when it comes to business logic, right? So let's take a look at SLAs first and what SLA is. So when it comes to SLAs, there is a big difference for the incident and the service request, because for incident, the SLAs depends upon the priority uh, or the urgency of a specific request. But when it comes to service request, it's pretty much going to be depends upon the workflow. So service request, when it comes to service request, SLAs are always mapped directly on the template. So when you open up a template and you go to workflow, you see that this SLA option is available over here, and you will be mapping the SLA directly on the template. So in the template itself, either you can create the SLA right from here for the service request, or else if you have already created the service level agreement separately, so if you go to the service catalog, you see the service level agreements over here. You can create as many service level agreements that you want, because this is template specific or service specific. Whatever the service that you're offering, it is very much specific to that. So you can create as many SLAs that you want, and you can associate the SLAs over here. So with a new build, we have brought in the feature to associate multiple SLAs to a single service request. So it's not always feasible to go with a single SLA for a service request, right? Because there are chances you may need to deliver a certain request faster than usual. In rare scenarios, if that's the case, you can associate multiple service requests, and when your user is requesting for a service, they will be able to choose the appropriate option. So they will be able to choose the service level agreement from here, either with high or with medium. I'm okay with in 10 minutes I can wait. If that's the case, they can go with the different SLA. So this is a typical example. So they can choose the respective SLA that they want during this request creation. On service request only this is available. So they can choose the SLA. You can also, of course, default SLAs from here. You can click on the cog and you can set them as default. So this is where you configure the SLAs. Can we configure SLA based upon the values selected on the service request form? Yes, Anil, you will be able to select SLAs depending upon the value that you select on a service request, but it's not like out of the box, or it's not like readily available as the incident request, because when it comes to incident request, pretty much you have the options such as business rules to set SLAs on the go. You can manipulate the priority and you can manipulate the urgency. So that's gonna update the SLA depending upon the priority. Unlike that, when it comes to service request, again, we may need to configure them using the field and form rules with the help of the JavaScript functions. Out of the box, we don't have an option, but of course we can use this to manipulate the service level agreement, because when the user is going to create, this again is going to be a field. So this is again going to be a drop down. This is again a field. So using the field and form rule, you will be able to apply SLAs for service request depending upon the fields that your user is choosing over here. Yep. So that's what, yeah. So that's what service level agreement is when it comes to the service request. So in service level agreement, SLAs or SLAs in general, so you have the response time and the resolution time. If it's going to be service request, it's going to be response time and fulfillment time when you should be fulfilling that service that you promised. And if there are any escalations associated with it, if you want to configure any escalations, if the SLA is breached, you can pretty much have 4 levels of escalation for response or fulfillment. And for response, you have 1 level escalation, like you can notify to whoever you want from the available list, either to the ticket owner or to the respective technician. You can pretty much notify them from the list of users available over here, and you can configure depending upon your workflow. You can configure the SLAs and the escalation notifications for your users. OLA, we will see this in detail while we discuss on the incident request. OLA is nothing but operational level agreement between different groups. So if there is a scenario where you want to have multiple teams from different multiple teams or different groups to participate on a specific request, such as user onboarding, if you want to configure or if you want to keep track or if you want to check those things on how much time they have spent, and if they have breached something operational, breached their operational level agreement. So this is where you configure that, and this will be available on the time analysis tab for you. So you can see that, okay, the group, the ticket is in unassigned for 17 minutes, and if I assign it to a different group, let's say network, so it's gonna update like, okay, so it is now configured into this group, and I can see the OLA is not configured. If I have configured an OLA, if this is breached, this is going to give me a message like, okay, the operational level agreement for this specific group is breached. So this is where you configure them. When you are configuring operational level agreements, you need to keep in mind that the operational level agreement should not exceed the fulfillment time. So whatever the time or the days that you configured over here, that time cannot be breached by the operational level agreement. So if you, let's say for an argument, you have configured the fulfillment time to be 1 day, and if you are configuring the operational level agreement for the network group to be 2 days, if that's the case, let me do this for oops, let me do this for 30 days. If I save this, this is going to give me a warning like the resolution time is getting exceeded. So this is where I should, I mean, while I'm configuring this, I need to keep this in mind. This agreement time cannot exceed the SLA time. Can we set a schedule for different SLAs like 9 to 5? Can we set a schedule for different SLAs? Actually, can you give me an example on what you mean by schedule?
So, Akshay here. So it's
Hi.
like someone is working from 9 to 5, and some team, the SL is assigned to for the technicians team, and for other regions, for the same service request, they are working in 12 to 5, but for the different configuration. So one SLA should be when the SLA has been assigned to that team. So 9 by 5 SLA should be attached. So the SLA will run from 9 to 5 only, and will pause in between the time?
If you want to stop SLA being running, there is an option called as stop timer. So you will be able to stop it. But if that is something that you need to calculate while you're providing a service, then 9 to 5. Okay, so let me think. Okay, let's open another tab. Okay, actually, so this is a typical support group that I have now. So what you're saying is, if my understanding is correct, the network group will be working from 9 to 5, and the service desk group might be working from different time zones. Is that right?
Yes, yes.
Operational hours.
Hi, this is Jay here. By any chance, are you talking about the service window? Because the service window is something which you would be configuring based on the group. So if this group will work between this particular timing and so
Right.
on. All right. Okay, this is something we are working on at present, but we can do a workaround. But I don't think it would be very straightforward. We may have to configure based on the sites. So that's not going to be straightforward, but we are working on it at present.
Okay, sure. Thank you.
Thank you, Akshay. Yeah. You
Thank
can continue, Armugam.
Yeah, thanks, Joe. Sure. So that's what SLAs and operational level agreement is. So as I mentioned, this should not exceed the total time that you configured for the resolution time. So that's something that you need to keep in mind when you're configuring. And yeah, moving on, let's talk about different ways of assigning a request, as well as the how SLA work on incident request. So incident request also, the service level agreement is similar to that of what we see on the service request. The only key difference being the SLA will always depend upon the criteria that you choose over here. You can either choose the criteria directly on the SLA, like you can go with priority and with the list of available options over here. You can either go with this, or else you have something called priority matrix, and you will be able to map SLAs based upon the impact and the urgency that your users are choosing. So if they choose the impact and urgency to be a specific value, let's say for an instance, if the impact is low and if the urgency is also low, if you want the low priority to be set, we can set the priority to be low. And when the priority is set to low based upon our SLA configuration, if you remember, so when the priority is low, this is going to automatically assign this SLA on the request. So this is how you map different SLAs in the incident. Unlike the service request, you will not be associating it directly on the template, but with the help of the conditions or the business logic that your customers are doing. So we have covered mostly on how we can configure the templates and how we can dynamically accept the inputs, manipulating approvers, sending approvers, tasks, and so on. Let's talk about the automations that our application has to offer. Automation in the sense manipulating things after the request is created, such as moving them to specific group, assigning specific technician, or setting priority, changing templates, so on and so forth. So when it comes to Service Test Plus, business rule is the first option we would always recommend for such type of automations, like assignments or moving or setting up certain things. So you can always think of business rules first if it's not available on the field and form rules. So using business rules, you can have multiple criterias. Of course, you can choose multiple criterias, up to 18 to 20 criterias, as well as perform actions depending upon the criteria. So if you have any uh, you know, use case, such as if you want to place it in a specific group, like if you want to place it in a hardware problems group, if they have reported in the description or in the subject, like my laptop is broken, something like that. If they wrote something like that, if you want to execute it on that specific scenario, you can go with business rules. You can check if that is available on that field, and you can execute that. Excuse me. And you can execute the actions depending upon that. So while we are discussing field and form rules, one of your team members had a question like which one takes priority or which one takes precedence, right? So business rule, when you're configuring certain things on business rule, have to keep in mind that business rule works before the ticket is created and before it is encoded or added into the database. So whenever we add information to the database, before the time itself, when it is in the object state itself, the business rule will kick in, and it will help you in most of the scenarios. Like if you want to prevent certain things to be negated, let's say for an instance, if you have an workflow like negate operation, create and edit, if the description contains broken, if you want to negate an option like you cannot submit, something like that. If this is the case, I'm configuring this on default settings. Negate is an option available on business rule only to not allow certain actions that you want your requester or the technician to take on. So even the requester is submitting something like broken in his subject. So if he is doing that, site, not associated. So if he is trying to submit that, description. Okay, description contains broken. So if he's trying to do that, that's going to give him a warning. So if you want to prevent request creation, you cannot deny an approval each and every time, because that's going to pile up the request, right? It's going to send out emails, take up your bandwidth, a lot of things that is associated. So this is one way of preventing a request being submitted or a certain action being taken. So if you want to prevent your technicians from moving, or if you want to prevent your technicians from updating the priority, because priority is pretty much tied to SLA, and if you don't want them to update it for certain requests, then of course you can do that. Or if you don't want to update categories for specific restricted categories, you can make use of the negate option. So this is going to allow you to pretty much configure most of the actions that you need when it comes to automations, like checking the category and assigning it to a specific team or a specific support group, or assigning it to a technician directly. Let's say that you have a VIP user, and whenever a VIP user is filing a request, you want that to be assigned to a specific technician, you can do that. Or after the request creation, if you want to update the category, subcategory, and items, of course you can configure that. Along with that, we have the ability to configure the priorities, which is closely tied to the SLAs, as well as the levels and the other things that you can go with, such as urgency, impact, or if you want to change the template itself, you have it. So you can go through these options one by one on the business rules on your test setup. You will be you can test this out and how it works. There is one other thing that you need to keep in mind while you're configuring the business rules. Those are the criteria that you configure are case sensitive, as well as they also take white spaces into account. So let's say for an instance, if I'm configuring broken with a space in front of it, this will take this space in front of it into account as well. And if I'm trying to update something, even for the negate option, so in the negate option, yes, if I'm doing the same negate option on the same ticket, I have only updated the description. Again, this happens on the submission level, like while we're adding it to the description, right? So the white space also takes into account. So if the space is not in front of the description, so there is no space right now, so this request will be submitted without any issues. So that's something that you need to keep in mind. And apart from the white space, there is one other thing that you need to keep in mind, that is going to be the site where the business rule is configured, because business rule is like pretty much tied to the site directly. So whatever the site that you're configuring, you have to keep in mind that if a user is from a different site, if he is from Mumbai site or a different site, if you have configured it only for Chennai, it will not work for the Mumbai users. So in your yesterday session, you might have noticed, so you see that the request is successfully submitted because we don't have a space in front for the description, which is why it allowed me to submit the request. Yeah, so when you were discussing about user management in your SLA session, you might have came across the site settings inside the application. So this is where you configure what kind of rules that you need to refer or copy from the different sites. So by default, it will always either copying or referring to the default settings. So whatever you configure for the default site in the business rule, so if you go to business rule, you can see that over here, business rule for default setting. If it's for specifically for a different site, such as Dubai, so right now it's referring to the default settings. So you don't need to create separate rules for Dubai, because whatever that you configure on default settings will be applicable for Dubai as well. So this is something that you need to keep in mind while you're working with business rules, because these are very dependent on the site. So when you are wondering like why the business rule is not executing properly, the first thing that you need to check is going to be site, and the next thing is going to be the white spaces, if any, that is associated with it. And while you're configuring sites, if you have things similar across the sites, such as if operational hour is going to be same across different sites, then you can always refer them. So the key difference between copy, refer, and custom settings is copy default settings means whatever the settings that you have on the default site will be configured or copied over to the site whichever you're copying to. Let's assume Dubai. So whatever that you have on default settings will be copied to the Dubai site as well. In addition to that, you can customize them on the go. As well as if you want to additionally have certain things, you can additionally configure business rules on the Dubai site. Refer default site means, so whatever the things that you configure for default site will be applicable. You cannot configure anything manually. So if you want to configure certain things, you need to do it with the default site. So that's what refer is. Custom settings will wipe out everything. So you need to build everything from scratch. If you haven't configured any, you have to build up everything from scratch, and you have to manually create the business roles or operational hours, whatever it is, you need to manually create them. So that's what custom is. So when you are working, you just need to keep in mind what kind of setting that specific site uses, and depending upon that, business rule or the other things will execute. For incident on service request, Nishika, can you give me an example on what you mean by table basis? Yeah, issue there. Uh, the business rule is always going to be, you know, independent depending upon the request. Either you can configure them on the incident management directly, or if that's something very specific to service request, of course you can configure them on the service request. But I'm not quite sure what you're referring to as table new entry on created a new entry in incident service request. Yeah, I will answer that question via chat, Nishi, after testing that issue. I'm sorry. After testing that, so let me just confirm or speed up what we are discussing. So business rules. So these are very independent for the incident request and the service request. So when you want to configure business rules for service request, you need to go in, go to service catalog and have to configure over there. If it's for incident, then under the incident management, you have to configure that. The next important topic that I want to discuss with you guys is request lifecycle. So what request lifecycle is? Let's say for an argument that if your organization have a workflow that you have to follow, like if you have a strict workflow, like you cannot move the request from open to on hold status right away. You need to request information, or you need these things to be completed, something like that. If you have a strict workflow on these or on this configured statuses, you can configure as many status that you want. On these available statuses, start ranging from open to closure. If you want to have a strict streamlined workflow, so request lifecycle is where you have to configure them. So let's say for an instance, if your technician is moving the request from open to resolved status, if you don't want them to go into that status right away, so there is a workflow like you have to put the ticket on in progress, and you need to work on the ticket, and you have to fill in the fields such as let me show you. So when you create a request, when you want to you don't want your technicians to update this right from open to close right away. And if you want to perform actions or in stages, if you want them to put on in progress before you perform anything, if that's the case, then this is where you configure. The request lifecycle is where you configure most of the things, such as what you should do when the request is moved from one state to another. So this is the state from open state to assigned state. If this is moving from this open state to assigned state, there is a transition happening between the statuses, right? So what we need to do during this instance, so in assigned status, if you want to mandate or if you want to manipulate anything, you can mandate and manipulate things in this transition status. So during this transitions, if you want to control things, this is where you control. And whatever the template this is published on, so I think I have published this on the application request, I believe. Yeah, so application crashes frequently. So that's where I configured that. So it's under data management. So let me create a test ticket and let me show you what I mean. Okay, let me add that item. So category, subcategory, item is also one thing that you can configure to segregate the request depending upon who is filing what. So I'm going to quickly add a new item under the firewall. So, if you remember, in my instant request, if I open the instant request and if I open up application crashes frequently, you can see that only group is mandatory over here, while the item is not. But when you see the new request creation, you can see that the item is mandatory over here. So where this is coming from? So this is coming from the request lifecycle. So there is a transition between nothing to open, like from the template to open, there is a transition called open. Over here, I have mandated fields, item, and request type. So in these statuses, you can see that pretty much I can control how my request should be created. So if you don't want that to be created on the template directly, so request lifecycle is something that you can think of for this transition. So once I have filled in the necessary information, I submit this. And after submitting, if you remember, on the other tickets, you saw that I have the request status over here, or this one is over there. The transition is not there. So I was able to close this without any issues. Right? I was able to close this. But when the RLC or request lifecycle is configured, this will force your technicians to follow the transition or the workflow. This will force your technicians to follow the procedure. Like, okay, right now this is not assigned to anyone, so I should assign it to someone. So I'm gonna assign it to myself. So right now I assigned, and I should move it to the next status, which is assigned status. Right now the ticket is assigned, and I can start the work. I can click and I can work on this request. I can do things on the template. If I want to make any changes or edits, I can do that. And post which I can either resolve this if I have fixed the issue, or I can put it on hold if I need some more information from the requester. I can put it on hold and I can resume the work again. It's gonna change to in progress again. And as soon as I resolve it, I can update the resolution and everything, and I can close the request. So now you can see that this is forcing your technician to follow the workflow that we have configured over here. So this is a pictorial representation of the transitions that we are controlling. From open to closure, we are controlling each and everything, like what should happen when the request is moved from assigned to in progress. And during all of these transitions, if you want to execute certain things, if you want to execute rules, if you want to mandate, you can do everything in request lifecycle. This is going to be a powerful option in your disposal if you want to configure these type of things in the customer's environment. So you can always think this as a tool which is going to force your technician to follow the workflow. So that's what RLC is about. So yeah, moving on. Can you guys hear me? Can anyone confirm? I had a network disconnection.
Yes,
Yeah.
sir. I guess we can hear you fine.
Yeah. All right. Thank you so much. Thank you, Krunal. Thank you, Akasi. So yeah, so that's what the request lifecycle is about. So you can pretty much control everything from the creation to the closure based upon each and every transition that's happening on the request. So in forwards or in backwards, so whatever the way, if you want to control a transition, so that's where you configure things, which is going to be a request lifecycle. So apart from request lifecycle, we have other automation options as well, such as category auto assign or the technician auto assign. So these are pretty much self-explanatory. The category auto assign, in the sense, if you have configured certain user on a category, so let's say for an instance, if the category is admin, I want this request to be assigned to John Roberts, regardless of whatever the role that I have configured. If that's the case, then this is going to execute. So I can create a request. So no matter who creates a request, And if the category is going to be admin, this will default the request to be added or assigned to John Roberts. So that's one other automation apart from business rules and custom triggers. And the other automation that we have is going to be technician auto assign. So technician auto assign will give you an ability to configure things uh, based upon various criteria, ranging from support groups, categories, and then unassigned requests. If you want to include any criteria, of course, you can enable the criteria such as assign it to only online technicians, or if you want to exclude certain things, of course, you can exclude them. So pretty much you can configure or control how the request should be assigned to them automatically. You can configure it with technician autos, and we out of the box we provide these two models like load balancing and round robin basis, and this can be executed either on the created request while it's creating it for the first time, or during the creating and editing operation, or only for unassigned requests. So pretty much this is also pretty much self-explanatory. And if you want to exclude technicians, of course you have the ability to exclude them. So if you don't want the administrators or coordinators to have the tickets assigned to them, you can pretty much exclude them. And if you want to exclude the offline technicians, whoever is working offline or whoever is assigned with a different task that needs to be carried forward and is offline, you can also enable this option. So online or option by me, I say this one. So your technicians have the ability to choose whether he is online or offline. So you can assign based upon this status as well. So that's one other thing when it comes to automation. So far that's what technician auto assign is about. So apart from this technician auto assign, pretty much request custom functions and custom triggers will allow you to execute custom actions depending upon events happening. So this will help you with the complete list of information from the request as a JSON object, and you can extrapolate either with the request custom functions that we have in place, or with any script such as any command line script, like any script that can be run on the command prompt or on the terminal. You can configure it with our application, provided that program runs on the application server. You can extrapolate any functionalities. So you guys will be going through this in detail in your last day of session with Jai. So that's what request custom functions as well as custom triggers is about. Request custom functions give you one more feature. I'm sorry, request custom menu is going to give you one more feature, and that's going to be creating HTML files while you're making any action. So request custom function by I mean, if I go to request, so you can see the custom action over here. So this is an request custom function. I'm sorry, request custom menu. So this is a customized menu. This is going to give me an HTML form where I can choose anything that I want. So this is a typical example that I have configured over here. So if you want to load any HTML files, and based upon that, based upon the options that you choose on this HTML file, if you want to take any actions, you can configure it over here on the request custom menu. So apart from this, we offer closing mandation rules for the technician. So when a technician is about to close a request, you may not need to configure everything on the request lifecycle, right? So you may need to check in certain scenarios whether a resolution field is filled in or not, whether a certain field that is already available on the template is completed or not. If you want to perform that check, so this is where you configure that. If you need to configure or enable that on the request closing rules, so whenever a technician is resolving or closing a request, they need to make sure that these fields are filled in. Whatever that you enable needs to be filled in before they actually close the request. So this is going to prompt the users while they are resolving it, making sure that these fields are filled in. And also you will be able to automate a few other things, such as you can automatically close the request whichever is in resolved status. So if a request is resolved, and if it's in resolved status for more than 3 days, if you haven't received any notification from your user, this is where you configure it, and this is going to automatically close the request. So that's what request closing rule is. And the same goes for approval denial as well. So if an approval is denied, you can close the request straight away. You don't need to wait. Or if you want to wait for certain days, of course you can wait, and you can choose the specific codes and you can close the request. So that is also something available. And request closure codes is nothing but the available while you're resolving it. You will be adding certain things such as, okay, I have successfully completed this, or depending upon the organization, you might have closure codes, right? So you can pretty much configure all the closure codes over here. And if you provide the technician with the ability to add their own resolution template or reply template, they will be able to configure them on the go. So this is again going to help them in time management as well. So they don't need to type and send the email again and again from the sections, because from the request itself, if they click on reply, this is going to give them with the available templates. So if I click on need more details, this is going to pre-populate everything. And while I'm sending out this notification, this is going to save much time for the technicians. Either you can configure the templates on your own, or you can provide them with access, so they will be able to configure the reply template or the resolution template on their own. So for resolution template also, you can add the resolutions, and the same will be available for you while you're resolving the tickets. So if I'm resolving it, so this is a mandatory. So while I'm resolving this, if I want to add any templates, if I want to add anything, if I want to select certain things from the template, if I want to add it over here, I can add the templates. Yeah, I can add the resolution templates over here, and this will be available for me to choose from the list of resolutions templates available, and we can select it directly while we are resolving the request. So that's what resolution template is about. Moving on. Yeah. So moving on, reply template, resolution template. Yeah, that's pretty much. I think we have pretty much covered almost everything when it comes to request management. So apart from this, we have a few other things, such as configuring the categories. If you want to have statuses apart from open, close, and so on, so you can configure these statuses. So when you're configuring these statuses, one more thing to keep in mind is going to be the timer, because when the timer is on, the SLA is going to be calculated. So while we are discussing about SLAs, I mentioned something about timer. So when it is on hold, you can see that the timer is stopped. But when it is on open status, you can see that the timer is running. So this is where you configure everything. If you are configuring new statuses, so timer is something that you need to keep in mind while you're creating these statuses, because this is pretty much going to affect the SLAs. So you have to keep this in mind while you're creating the request. And levels and mode, depending upon your organization, you can configure this, and this is again going to help you in configuring the SLAs and escalations depending upon the requirement. And mode is pretty straightforward and self-explanatory. It's going to give you the options such as chat, phone, email, or web form. If there is any other mode apart from this that you want to add, of course you can add them over here. And impact and urgency, those are also very similar. And the priority is what I have been mentioning, like for the SLAs, priority is also very mandatory. And also you can color code them as well when it comes to request management. And apart from that, all the other things are pretty much going to be creating templates for the task or work logs and those kind of things. And apart from this, we have out of the box certain options such as merging two requests or linking a request and moving a request from one instance to another. So previously when we introduced ESM, this option was not available, but we brought in this feature for move request. So if you're moving the request from the IT help desk instance to HR instance, I mean this human resource instance over here, you can of course do that right from the ticket itself. But while you're moving, the ticket in this instance will be closed, and on the HR instance, a new ticket will be created, and only few information will be carried forward, because all this category, subcategory will not be available on the HR instance as well, right? Because the HRs might use a different category and subcategories. So this will not be available for them, which is why the reason only the information such as notes, attachments, and conversations and inline images are the only information that will be taken to the new instance or the next instance. Apart from that, all the other information will be excluded or shredded upon. So that's something that you need to keep in mind if you are moving the request from one instance to another. And pretty much, if you're wondering what this NT, NN, NW means, is these are keyboard shortcuts. So you're working on, while your technicians are working on the request, if they want to quickly add a work log, they can type NW. That's gonna open up this work log menu, so they can type their work log amount of time that they spend, so that this will be available on the time analysis page. You can understand how much time a technician have performed a certain thing, so you can pretty much configure that over there. So that's what these these keys or letters mentioned inside the braces mean. And pretty much apart from this, all the other things are pretty explanatory, self-explanatory. Like link requests, if you want to link multiple requests, you can link them. And depending upon which request you have linked to, you can copy the resolution or copy the solutions depending upon how you link them. And merging the request is also one other thing. So if you have multiple requests, let me show that from the list view. So if you have multiple requests, if these two requests are of same thing, if you want to merge them, you can merge them from here, and you can choose whichever is the parent, so that those two requests will be merged into two. So if you have merge option, as well as if you want to perform bulk edits, of course you can choose everything, and you can click on actions and you can edit, and you can almost edit all the fields. If there are any fields that is very much specific to that template, then those fields will not be available over here on this bulk edit. So while you're doing bulk edits, you should keep this in mind as well. So that's what it is about, the bulk edit option. Apart from that, view reminder or stop timer or associating. So you will be seeing these also in detail while Agassi is discussing about what is problem or what is change, the other modules typically. So he will be explaining them. So yeah, so apart from this, I just want to mention this as well. So in the template, or while you're working with technicians, in our previous builds, we never had this option to customize how the layout should look for the technician or for the requester. But with our latest version, we brought in that feature as well. So pretty much you can configure where the history tab should appear, and if you want to remove certain things, of course you can remove the property. Yeah, you can remove these options and you can save it. So all these you can control, pretty much control. For the technician, or for the request as well. So you can see that I have pretty much removed everything right now on the right pane. I don't see any of those information. If I want to bring them back, I can restore everything. I can say this, that's going to bring everything back. And the same goes for the requester as well. So for the requester as well, I can add or remove properties based upon my need, and I can rearrange them as well. If I want the description to be available over there, or if I want the conversation to be at the bottom, I can pretty much configure or pretty much realign things as per my needs. I can do whatever I want with the layout that I'm configuring over there. So that's pretty much about request management, guys. So apart from the question that's posted, do we have any other questions? How do we move development to product instance? Okay, Anil also have a question. Can we create custom matrices based on fields on instant, similar to priority matrix? For example, assign to technician of the request. Of course, Anil, I think you're referring to the business rules. Custom matrices, in the sense you can pretty much configure what kind of criteria that you want to check. It could be a combination of anything, such ranging from these available fields, requester, subject, category, or whatever. Pretty much we have almost all the fields over here. You can choose what the field is, and you can check if that is matching your criteria. And based upon the criteria, you can assign it to the technician. I can remove this action. I can assign it to the technician directly based upon the criteria that I'm seeing over there. And Nazir also have a question like, how do we move the development from dev to prod? So while you're creating a new instance, if you remember, while you're creating an instance, you will be configuring the owner for that instance as well, right? So if I'm creating a new instance, switch from facilities. Why not HR again? Let me choose facilities. If you remember, so while I'm creating an instance, I choose an owner over here. So so this owner is the one. So this owner, whenever they access the owner, that's going to change. So he needs to access that instance in order for this status to change. So when it comes to different instances, if you're referring to the production instance in the database directly, uh, like during the migrations, we may ask question like whether this is a production instance or not. If you're referring to that, then that's something that you need to execute on the database directly in order to change that as an as a production, because by default it will be updated as non-production environment. If that's something that you want to change as production, you have to update it on the database directly. Is that what you're referring?
Yeah, Armugam. So, I mean, here, so for example, if we're creating business rules or new custom rules, so how are we going to implement that in production instance? I mean, there would be certain things that we would be doing in dev, and then we might be testing, and then we'll implement in production, right?
Mhm. So if it's going to be a single implementation, like from start to finish, if you're doing that in complete pay, then pretty much you will be testing in everything on the production itself directly. But if you have a separate instance or like a development instance, like releasing features, if your customer is requesting for new things, and if you are implementing them, then if you're having a different development instance, then of course you have to test it over there, and you have to configure it manually on the other instance, because technically we don't have connectivity between the development and the production instance. So you may need to configure that manually.
So we have to go in the production instance and again develop that manually there in production.
Exactly, that is correct. Yeah.
Okay.
Mhm. Because the reason is I mean, there is no way that we will keep track of whether a same instance or same thing is running as a production as well. We don't keep track of those things, and also there is no way of communication. Like we don't communicate with the production to dev. We don't do that as well. So which is why the reason you may need to configure that manually on the production instance.
Okay. And is there any way we also do a versioning of all the scripts? So if somebody changes a script, can we know that who changed it or when it was changed, something like that, and audit on this?
Yes, of course. You have. We keep track of things. Even if you consider the request, you can clearly see that we will tracking each and every action that is happening on the request action or events that is happening on the request back end or front end. So whatever the
No,
thing is
not
yeah.
the request scripts, like for example, the business rule.
Yes, yes. So I'm coming over there. So you can
Okay.
keep track like this. Similar to that, we also have something called syslog viewer. So if you go inside it, I can see the things or events that's happened on my instance. So let's say for an instance, a moment ago I have updated the business rule. So I have the option or I have the log for that, like administrator updated the business rule and he have configured so and so over here. So whatever the event that's happening on the request or on the configuration side, so we will keep track of everything. So you can see that almost 4,000 events have been captured so far. I have deleted few of them. So in any change that you do, like if I'm going inside the business rule again, if I'm changing this test, if I'm updating this, if I'm changing this test, so if I'm adding in another criteria, so if I'm adding another criteria such as this is again will be captured over here. You can see that business rule is modified at the time 5:33. So pretty much whatever the configuration that you change, we will capture that information over here.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, welcome. Yeah. So, anyone have any other question apart from this?
I've got one question on the history. Like, how long do you retain this?
We
Is it
don't
only
delete. We don't delete the system logs. Pretty much, we will capture the actions and we don't delete them until unless someone manually delete these requests. Mm, let me check. I don't think we will delete this syslog any given time frame, I believe. But let me also confirm that. As far as I know, we don't delete anything from the syslog viewer until unless someone manually deletes it.
Yeah, once again, yeah, Armugam, I've been listening to this conversation. Actually, there is a schedule to delete of unwanted notification, I mean, unwanted records from here. So we delete something like we do a cleanup process. So what I do is I'll check it out. What are all the different records that are being cleaned up as part of the cleanup procedure. We do some cleanup, but not that of important data. All right. So I'll get you the info about what are all the records that are being deleted automatically from this system log viewer.
okay? Sure.
Yeah, you can continue, Armugam.
Yeah, I think I have covered most of my topics, Jake. So going on with the Q&A. So guys, do you have any other question? For example, Anil have a question like matrix duration calculation. Of course, Anil, that's available. So on the time analysis tab, you can pretty much see how much time a technician spent from the time of assignment. You can calculate that information from here. Anyone have any other question?
Okay. Does the tool have a debugger? So what do you expect, as a debugger? So do you want the application to, help you out in getting you the logs like that?
Exactly like we suppose we have written a client script and
Mm.
we are running it and we have to figure out and it's failing. So we have to figure where the error and all those things are.
Okay,
So
so
do
we
we
have
have
a logging mechanism. That is, we will track whatever actions you do on the system and also the errors. So we can get it from the support link. Arumugu, can you click on the support icon, headset icon?
Yeah, 1 minute check.
And there you have pretty much whatever needed for troubleshooting any issues that may occur in the application. So here you do have an option to see the logs, as well as you can get the whole set of files that are created with, the complete set of logs for different actions you do on the system.
okay? Thank you.
Right, and also our application is a Java-based application. It runs on a Java runtime environment. So in case of any performance-related issues, you would like to know what are all the different operations that are running in the background, there is an option called thread dump, and this is going to help you out in troubleshooting the performance issue. So we'll be talking about all these in detail over the last day, second session, and in which we will be discussing about the architecture of the application and also about different logs available through which we can debug on any error that may occur in the application.
Okay.
All
Thank you.
right. Yeah, any other questions on this particular session? So if you do not have any questions, probably we can quickly jump on. Okay, that is a question. There's a feature available to roll back to the earlier version or a build if there is something unwanted happened during the implementation. Unfortunately, we don't have that at present. We can only upgrade to the next builds. We cannot roll back to the previous version. But we do have a backup mechanism, meaning you can take a backup of the application automatically on a periodic basis. So say, for example, if you have scheduled the backup to happen every day, say if something has been messed up, you can pick the previous day backup. And if it's going to be a prior version, then you can install the same prior version and you can restore the data backup. So that's going to get you all the configurations, whatever you had in the previous day. So that's one option available, and it is not possible to roll back. But you can always take a backup and restore it on the version and the build in which it was taken.